Mother Hulda. Once upon a time, in a little village that lay at the edge of a wide and lonely forest, there lived a widow with 2 daughters. Now one of these daughters was fair of face and gentle of spirit, and moreover, she was diligent in her labors, ever ready to put her hand to the spindle or sweep the hearth without complaint. The other daughter, however, was coarse of feature and slothful in habit, and though her heart was hard, she was beloved above all by the widow, for she was her own flesh and blood. Thus it befell that the fair and industrious child was despised and burdened with every task of the household, while her idle sister sat idly at ease, cared for and favored. Day after weary day, the poor girl was sent out to the roadside, well with her distaff, there to spin until her fingers grew sore and the blood rose beneath her nails. The wind blew cold, the sun burned hot, yet she was not permitted to rest. Day, as her spindle grew slick with blood, she dipped it into the well to cleanse it. Alas, it slipped from her weary hand and sank into the dark water, vanishing from sight. The child wept bitterly, for she feared her stepmother's wrath, and she hastened home to confess her misfortune. But the widow, sharp of tongue and merciless of heart, scolded her cruelly and cried, "If your clumsy fingers have let fall the spindle, then down into the well you must go and fetch it again." Trembling, the maiden returned to the well. She gazed into its depth, uncertain what to do, and in her despair, she cast herself into the water, following after the spindle. Darkness closed around her, and she knew no more. When she awoke, she found herself not in the cold stone depths, but in a sunlit meadow where flowers blossomed bright, and the air was sweet with birdsong. Astonished, she walked through the meadow, and soon she came upon a baker's oven. The oven was full of golden loaves, and they cried out with human voices, "Oh, take us out, or we shall burn. We are baked enough already." The maiden, pitying them, drew near, and with the baker's peel, she removed the loaves, one by one, until all were saved from burning. Then she journeyed farther, and soon she came to a great apple tree, laden until its boughs bent low with fruit. The tree called to her, "Oh, shake me, for all my apples are ripe." So she shook the branches with all her might, and down the apples came like a rain of gold. She gathered them neatly into a heap and left none lying in the grass. After this, she wandered still farther until she came to a little house. At the window, appeared an old woman with teeth so great and long that the maiden was frightened and nearly fled. But the crone spoke kindly. "Be not afraid, dear child. Come dwell with me. If you keep my house in good order and do the work faithfully, all shall go well with you. Above all, you must take great care in making my bed and in shaking it thoroughly. For when the feathers fly, then in the world above it snows. For I am none other than Mother Hulda." Hearing these gentle words, the maiden took courage and entered into service. She worked diligently, rising early, tending the hearth, keeping the rooms in order, and shaking the bed so that the feathers flew like winter flakes. Mother Hulda was pleased with her, and the girl lived happily, with never a harsh word, but with good meat boiled and roasted every day. Yet, after a long while, a sadness crept into her heart. For though her lot was better than ever it had been at home, she longed to see her own roof again. At last she spoke to Mother Hulda and said, "My mistress, though I fare well here, my heart yearns for home, and I can remain no longer." Mother Hulda answered kindly, "Your longing pleases me, for you have served me faithfully. I myself will send you home." So she took the maiden by the hand and led her to a great door. As the child passed through, there fell upon her a shower of gold so heavy and so bright that she stood covered with it from head to foot. "This is your reward for diligence," said Mother Hulda, and she gave her also the very spindle that had once fallen into the well. Then the door closed, and the girl found herself once more near her mother's house. As she crossed the yard, the cock perched on the well cried aloud, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Our golden girl has come home too." She entered the house shining with gold, and her mother welcomed her warmly now that she saw such riches upon her. When the tale was told, the mother's heart burned with greed, and she resolved that her lazy daughter should gain the same fortune. So she bade the ugly one sit by the well and spin. To stain the spindle with blood, she pricked her finger upon the hedge of thorns, then flung the spindle into the water and leapt after it. She too awoke in the meadow and walked the same path. When she came to the oven, the loaves cried, "Oh, take us out, or we shall burn. We are baked enough already." But she only scoffed, saying, "I have no wish to soil my hands," and went her way. Then she came to the apple tree, and it cried, "Oh, shake me, for all my apples are ripe." But the girl answered, "One might fall on my head," and passed on without a glance. At last she reached Mother Hulda's house. Knowing already of her teeth, she felt no fear, and entered readily into service, dreaming of the gold. The first day she worked well, but on the second she grew idle, and on the third more slothful still. She would not rise early, nor sweep, nor make the bed, so the feathers might fly. Mother Hulda soon grew weary of her, and said she might leave. The girl rejoiced, thinking the shower of gold awaited her. But when she passed through the great door, instead of golden treasure, a kettle of black pitch was poured over her, so that she stood dripping and foul. "This is the reward of idleness," said Mother Hulda, and the door was shut. So the slothful daughter returned home covered in pitch, and as she crossed the yard, the cock upon the well cried, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, our sooty girl has come home too." And the pitch clung to her fast, as if it were her second skin, and no water nor scrubbing could ever wash it away for all the days of her life. The Valiant Little Tailor. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting on his board near the window and working cheerfully with all his might, when an old woman came down the street crying, "Good jelly to sell, good jelly to sell." The cry sounded pleasant in the little tailor's ears, so he put his head out of the window and called out, "Here, my good woman, come here if you want a customer." So the poor woman climbed the steps with her heavy basket and was obliged to unpack and display all her pots to the tailor. He looked at every one of them, and lifting all the lids, applied his nose to each, and said at last, "The jelly seems pretty good. You may weigh me out 4 half-ounces, or I don't mind having 1/4 of a pound." The woman, who had expected to find a good customer, gave him what he asked for, but went off angry and grumbling. "This jelly is the very thing for me," cried the little tailor. "It will give me strength and cunning." And he took down the bread from the cupboard, cut a whole round of the loaf, and spread the jelly on it, laid it near him, and went on stitching more gallantly than ever. All the while, the scent of the sweet jelly was spreading throughout the room, where there were quantities of flies, who were attracted by it and flew to partake. "Now then, who asked you to come?" said the tailor, and drove the unbidden guests away. But the flies, not understanding his language, were not to be got rid of like that, and returned in larger numbers than before. Then the tailor, not being able to stand it any longer, took from his chimney corner a ragged cloth, and saying, "Now, I'll let you have it," beat it among them unmercifully. When he ceased and counted the slain, he found 7 lying dead before him. "This is indeed somewhat," he said, wondering at his own gallantry. "The whole town shall know this." So he hastened to cut out a belt, and he stitched it and put on it in large capitals, 7 at one blow. "The town, did I say?" said the little tailor. The whole world shall know it." And his heart quivered with joy, like a lamb's tail. The tailor fastened the belt round him and began to think of going out into the world, for his workshop seemed too small for his worship. So he looked about in all the house for something that it would be useful to take with him. But he found nothing but an old cheese, which he put in his pocket. Outside the door, he noticed that a bird had got caught in the bushes. So he took that and put it in his pocket with the cheese. Then he set out gallantly on his way, and as he was light and active, he felt no fatigue. The way led over a mountain, and when he reached the topmost peak, he saw a terrible giant sitting there, and looking about him at his ease. The tailor went bravely up to him, called out to him, and said, "Comrade, good day. There you sit, looking over the wide world. I am on the way thither to seek my fortune. Have you a fancy to go with me?" The giant looked at the tailor contemptuously and said, "You little rascal, you miserable fellow." "That may be," answered the little tailor, and undoing his coat, he showed the giant his belt. "You can read there whether I am a man or not." The giant read, "7 at one blow," and thinking it meant men that the tailor had killed, felt at once more respect for the little fellow. But as he wanted to prove him, he took up a stone and squeezed it so hard that water came out of it. "Now you can do that," said the giant. "That is, if you have the strength for it." "That's not much," said the little tailor. "I call that play." And he put his hand in his pocket and took out the cheese and squeezed it, so that the whey ran out of it. "Well," said he, "what do you think of that?" The giant did not know what to say to it, for he could not have believed it of the little man. Then the giant took up a stone and threw it so high that it was nearly out of sight. "Now, little fellow, suppose you do that." "Well thrown," said the tailor, but the stone fell back to earth again. "I will throw you one that will never come back." So he felt in his pocket, took out the bird, and threw it into the air. And the bird, when it found itself at liberty, took wing, flew off, and returned no more. "What do you think of that, comrade?" asked the tailor. "There is no doubt that you can throw," said the giant, "but we will see if you can carry." He led the little tailor to a mighty oak tree which had been felled and was lying on the ground, and said, "Now, if you are strong enough, help me to carry this tree out of the wood." "Willingly," answered the little man. "You take the trunk on your shoulders. I will take the branches with all their foliage. That is much the most difficult." So the giant took the trunk on his shoulders, and the tailor seated himself on a branch, and the giant, who could not see what he was doing, had the whole tree to carry, and the little man on it as well. And the little man was very cheerful and merry, and whistled the tune. There were 3 tailors riding by, as if carrying the tree was mere child's play. The giant, when he had struggled on under his heavy load a part of the way, was tired out, and cried, "Look here, I must let go the tree." The tailor jumped off quickly, and taking hold of the tree with both arms, as if he were carrying it, said to the giant, "You see, you can't carry the tree, though you are such a big fellow." They went on together a little farther, and presently they came to a cherry tree, and the giant took hold of the topmost branches, where the ripest fruit hung, and pulling them downwards, gave them to the tailor to hold, bidding him eat. But the little tailor was much too weak to hold the tree, and as the giant let go, the tree sprang back, and the tailor was caught up into the air. And when he dropped down again without any damage, the giant said to him, "How is this? Haven't you strength enough to hold such a weak sprig as that?" "It is not strength that is lacking," answered the little tailor. "How should it to one who has slain 7 at one blow? I just jumped over the tree because the hunters are shooting down there in the bushes. You jump it too, if you can." The giant made the attempt, and not being able to vault the tree, he remained hanging in the branches, so that once more the little tailor got the better of him. Then said the giant, "As you are such a gallant fellow, suppose you come with me to our den and stay the night." The tailor was quite willing, and he followed him. When they reached the den, there sat some other giants by the fire, and each had a roasted sheep in his hand, and was eating it. The little tailor looked round and thought, "There is more elbow room here than in my workshop." And the giant showed him a bed, and told him he had better lie down upon it and go to sleep. The bed was, however, too big for the tailor, so he did not stay in it, but crept into a corner to sleep. As soon as it was midnight, the giant got up, took a great staff of iron, and beat the bed through with one stroke, and supposed he had made an end of that grasshopper of a tailor. Very early in the morning, the giants went into the wood and forgot all about the little tailor. And when they saw him coming after them, alive and merry, they were terribly frightened, and, thinking he was going to kill them, they ran away in all haste. So the little tailor marched on, always following his nose. And after he had gone a great way, he entered the courtyard belonging to a king's palace, and there he felt so overpowered with fatigue that he lay down and fell asleep. In the meanwhile came various people who looked at him very curiously, and read on his belt 7 at one blow." "Oh," said they, "why should this great lord come here in time of peace? What a mighty champion he must be." Then they went and told the king about him, and they thought that if war should break out, what a worthy and useful man he would be, and that he ought not to be allowed to depart at any price. The king then summoned his council and sent one of his courtiers to the little tailor to beg him, so soon as he should wake up, to consent to serve in the king's army. So the messenger stood and waited at the sleeper's side until his limbs began to stretch and his eyes to open. And then he carried his answer back. And the answer was, "That was the reason for which I came," said the little tailor. "I am ready to enter the king's service." So he was received into it very honorably, and a separate dwelling set apart for him. But the rest of the soldiers were very much set against the little tailor, and they wished him 1,000 miles away. "What shall be done about it?" they said among themselves. "If we pick a quarrel and fight with him, then 7 of us will fall at each blow. That will be of no good to us." So they came to a resolution and went all together to the king to ask for their discharge. "We never intended," said they, "to serve with a man who kills 7 at a blow." The king felt sorry to lose all his faithful servants because of one man, and he wished that he had never seen him, and would willingly get rid of him if he might. But he did not dare to dismiss the little tailor, for fear he should kill all the king's people and place himself upon the throne. He thought a long while about it, and at last made up his mind what to do. He sent for the little tailor and told him that as he was so great a warrior, he had a proposal to make to him. He told him that in a wood in his dominions dwelt 2 giants who did great damage by robbery, murder, and fire, and that no man durst go near them for fear of his life, but that if the tailor should overcome and slay both these giants, the king would give him his only daughter in marriage, and half his kingdom as dowry, and that 100 horsemen should go with him to give him assistance. That would be something for a man like me. One, thought the little tailor, a beautiful princess and half a kingdom are not to be had every day. And he said to the king, "Oh yes, I can soon overcome the giants, and yet have no need of the 100 horsemen. He who can kill 7 at one blow has no need to be afraid of 2. So the little tailor set out, and the 100 horsemen followed him. When he came to the border of the wood, he said to his escort, "Stay here while I go to attack the giants." Then he sprang into the wood and looked about him right and left. After a while, he caught sight of the 2 giants. They were lying down under a tree asleep and snoring, so that all the branches shook. The little tailor, all alive filled both his pockets with stones, and climbed up into the tree, and made his way to an overhanging bough, so that he could seat himself just above the sleepers. And from there, he let one stone after another fall on the chest of one of the giants. For a long time, the giant was quite unaware of this, but at last he waked up and pushed his comrade and said, "What are you hitting me for?" "You are dreaming," said the other. "I am not touching you." And they composed themselves again to sleep. And the tailor let fall a stone on the other giant. "What can that be?" cried he. "What are you casting at me?" "I am casting nothing at you," answered the first, grumbling. They disputed about it for a while, but as they were tired, they gave it up at last, and their eyes closed once more. Then the little tailor began his game anew, picked out a heavier stone, and threw it down with force upon the first giant's chest. "This is too much," cried he, and sprang up like a madman, and struck his companion such a blow that the tree shook above them. The other paid him back with ready coin, and they fought with such fury that they tore up trees by their roots to use for weapons against each other, so that at last they both of them lay dead upon the ground. And now the little tailor got down. "Another piece of luck," said he, "that the tree I was sitting in did not get torn up too, or else I should have had to jump like a squirrel from one tree to another." Then he drew his sword and gave each of the giants a few hacks in the breast, and went back to the horseman and said, "The deed is done. I have made an end of both of them. But it went hard with me. In the struggle they rooted up trees to defend themselves. But it was of no use. They had to do with a man who can kill 7 at one blow." "Then are you not wounded?" asked the horseman. "Nothing of the sort," answered the tailor. "I have not turned a hair." The horseman still would not believe it, and rode into the wood to see, and there they found the giants wallowing in their blood, and all about them lying the uprooted trees. The little tailor then claimed the promised boon, but the king repented him of his offer, and he sought again how to rid himself of the hero. "Before you can possess my daughter and the half of my kingdom," said he to the tailor, "you must perform another heroic act. In the wood lives a unicorn who does great damage. You must secure him. A unicorn does not strike more terror into me than 2 giants, 7 at one blow. That is my way," was the tailor's answer. So, taking a rope and an oars with him, he went out into the wood and told those who were ordered to attend him to wait outside. He had not far to seek. The unicorn soon came out and sprang at him, as if he would make an end of him without delay. "Softly, softly," said he, "most haste, worst speed, and remained standing until the animal came quite near. Then he slipped quietly behind a tree. The unicorn ran with all his might against the tree and stuck his horn so deep into the trunk that he could not get it out again, and so was taken. "Now I have you," said the tailor, coming out from behind the tree, and, putting the rope round the unicorn's neck, he took the axe, set free the horn, and when all his party were assembled, he led forth the animal and brought it to the king. The king did not yet wish to give him the promised reward, and set him a third task to do. Before the wedding could take place, the tailor was to secure a wild boar, which had done a great deal of damage in the wood. The huntsmen were to accompany him. "All right," said the tailor, "this is child's play." But he did not take the huntsmen into the wood, and they were all the better pleased, for the wild boar had many a time before received them in such a way that they had no fancy to disturb him. When the boar caught sight of the tailor, he ran at him with foaming mouth and gleaming tusks to bear him to the ground. But the nimble hero rushed into a chapel which chanced to be near, and jumped quickly out of a window on the other side. The boar ran after him, and when he got inside, the door shut after him, and there he was imprisoned, for the creature was too big and unwieldy to jump out of the window too. Then the little tailor called the huntsmen that they might see the prisoner with their own eyes. And then he betook himself to the king, who now, whether he liked it or not, was obliged to fulfill his promise and give him his daughter and the half of his kingdom. But if he had known that the great warrior was only a little tailor, he would have taken it still more to heart. So the wedding was celebrated with great splendor and little joy, and the tailor was made into a king. One night, the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep and saying, "Now, boy, make me that waistcoat and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard measure about your shoulders." And so, as she perceived of what low birth her husband was, she went to her father the next morning and told him all, and begged him to set her free from a man who was nothing better than a tailor. The king bade her be comforted, saying, "Tonight, leave your bedroom door open. My guard shall stand outside, and when he is asleep, they shall come in and bind him and carry him off to a ship, and he shall be sent to the other side of the world." So the wife felt consoled, but the king's water-bearer, who had been listening all the while, went to the little tailor and disclosed to him the whole plan. "I shall put a stop to all this," said he. At night, he lay down as usual in bed, and when his wife thought that he was asleep, she got up, opened the door, and lay down again. The little tailor, who only made believe to be asleep, began to murmur plainly, "Now, boy, make me that waistcoat, and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard measure about your shoulders. I have slain 7 at one blow, killed 2 giants, caught a unicorn, and taken a wild boar. And shall I be afraid of those who are standing outside my room door?" And when they heard the tailor say this, a great fear seized them. They fled away as if they had been wild hares, and none of them would venture to attack him. And so the little tailor, all his lifetime, remained a king. The 7 Ravens. Once upon a time, in a land where forests whispered secrets and rivers carried songs older than memory, there dwelt a man who longed with all his heart for a daughter. He had 7 sons already, strong boys, lively and loud, but no daughter had yet blessed his home. For years he hoped, and for years he was disappointed, until at last his wife gave him tidings that she bore another child beneath her heart. When the child came into the world, behold, it was a little girl. Their joy overflowed like spring water in a barren land. Yet the joy was soon mingled with sorrow, for the maiden was pale and frail, so slight that it seemed the breath of a wind might carry her away. Out of fear that she might not survive, the parents resolved that she must be baptized in secret and without delay. The father, anxious and impatient, handed a jug to his eldest boy and bade him fetch water quickly from the spring. But scarcely had the eldest set out when the 6 younger brothers followed after, unwilling to be left behind. Each of them, eager to show his worth, strove to be the first to dip the jug. In their haste and quarrel, the vessel slipped, clattered, and fell deep into the well, vanishing into the dark water below. Then they stood silent, staring into the depths, and none dared to return home with empty hands. Shame held them fast. As the hours passed and the boys did not return, the father's worry grew into anger. "They are idling at play," he muttered. "Wicked, thoughtless boys. They care not whether their sister lives or dies." Fear gnawed at him that the child might perish unbaptized. His wrath boiled over, and in his fury he cried aloud, "Would that all 7 of them were turned into ravens." Scarcely had the words left his lips when a rushing sound filled the air, like a storm rising from nowhere. He looked up and saw 7 black shapes wheeling above him, ravens, cold, dark, and shining, beat their wings and flew away toward the horizon. His curse had become truth. Grief fell heavy upon the parents' hearts, yet no cry could call the children back. The curse was irrevocable. Still, the little daughter thrived, and as the years passed, she grew straight and strong. Her cheeks gained color like roses in bloom, and her eyes shone clear as morning dew. The parents clung to her, taking comfort in her presence, though a shadow of sorrow lingered always behind their smiles. They never spoke to her of the brothers she had once had, keeping that secret locked in silence. But secrets are like seeds sown in darkness. Sooner or later, they sprout. One day, when the maiden had grown into her youth, she overheard voices whispering. Villagers spoke of her beauty, but their words carried bitterness too. "She is fair enough," they said, "yet she bears the guilt of her brother's fate. For her sake, 7 sons were lost." The maiden trembled as though struck by a cold wind. Her heart throbbed with unease. She ran to her father and mother and asked, "Tell me the truth. Did I once have brothers? And what has become of them?" The parents could keep the secret no longer. With heavy sighs, they told her the tale, that her 7 brothers had been changed into ravens by her father's hasty curse, and that it was not her fault, but the decree of heaven. Yet these words did not soothe her spirit. Day after day she pondered, until at last she resolved within herself, "I will seek my brothers, wherever they are hidden, and bring them back to their true form, whatever the cost." Rest left her, peace departed, and before dawn one morning she slipped from her home, carrying with her only a few simple things: a small ring from her parents as a token, a loaf of bread against hunger, a little pitcher of water against thirst, and a tiny chair to rest upon in weariness. With these scant provisions, she set her face toward the wide and unknown world. She wandered far, further than any road she had ever seen, past hills that faded into blue distance, and forests that seemed without end. At last she came to the dwelling of the sun, but the sun blazed fierce and merciless, its flames devouring like the jaws of a monster. It burned against her tender skin, and she fled in terror before it swallowed her whole. Next, she sought the moon. Yet the moon was not gentle as she had hoped, but cold as death and cruel besides. Its pale light pierced her, and its voice rang out sharp as frost. "I smell the flesh of men." Shuddering, the maiden turned and ran with all her strength. At length, she came to the realm of the stars. There she found solace, for the stars were kind and shone down with gentle light. Each sat upon its own little throne of silver. The morning star rose, and in compassion gave her a gift, a small chicken's drumstick. Guard this well," said the star, "for without it, you cannot open the glass mountain. And within that mountain, your brothers are imprisoned." She took the gift, wrapped it carefully, and journeyed on until she stood before the glass mountain. Its walls gleamed high and terrible, like a frozen wave of crystal rising into the sky. She sought the drumstick, but when she unwrapped the cloth, her heart nearly broke. The bone was gone, lost upon the way. In despair, she whispered, "What shall I do now?" Yet her resolve did not falter. Drawing her knife, she cut off her own small finger, and bleeding though she was, she placed it in the lock. The mountain door opened before her. Inside, in halls glittering like ice, a little dwarf came forward and asked, "Child, what seekest thou?" She answered, "My 7 brothers, who were changed into ravens." The dwarf nodded. "They are not home. Yet, if thou wilt wait, come in." He set before her 7 little plates of food and 7 little cups of drink, ready for the brothers' return. The maiden, faint with hunger, nibbled a morsel from each plate and sipped a drop from each cup. Into the last glass, she let fall the ring she had carried from her parents, a secret token. Soon there came a sound, whirring wings and a rushing storm through the air. The 7 ravens returned, dark and heavy. They sat down to eat and drink. But one cried, "Who has tasted of my plate?" Another cried, "Who has sipped from my cup?" "A human mouth has been here." Then the 7th lifted his glass, and as he drank, the ring touched his lips. He gazed upon it and knew it at once. "This ring belongs to our father and mother," he cried. "God grant our sister be here, then we are saved." At that, the maiden stepped forth from her hiding place. When her brothers beheld her, their black wings fell away, and they stood before her once more as men, pale but whole, 7 young men restored. They embraced her, wept for joy, and kissed her again and again. Together, they left the mountain, and their hearts were lighter than ever before. With laughter and thanksgiving, they journeyed home, where their parents received them with astonishment and tears of gladness. Thus the sisters' courage and sacrifice broke the curse, and the family was made whole once more. The Wolf and the Fox. Once upon a time, deep in the shadowy woods where moss hung from the trees, and the wind whispered secrets through the branches, there lived a wolf and a fox. The wolf fierce of tooth and claw, was the master. The fox, smaller and sly, was the servant. Whatever the wolf desired, the fox was compelled to do, for he was weaker in body and couldn't break free. Yet in his heart, the fox longed to be rid of his greedy master, though he dared not show it. It happened one dusky evening, as they wandered among the pines, that the wolf turned his yellow eyes upon the fox and said, "Red fox, fetch me something to eat, or by my hunger I shall tear thee to pieces and eat thee instead." Trembling, the fox bowed his head and answered, "I know of a farmyard not far from here, where 2 tender lambs are kept. If it please thee, we may take one of them." This pleased the wolf mightily, and they set out together. The fox crept silently into the yard, nimble as a shadow, seized one little lamb, and brought it to his master. The wolf fell upon it at once, devouring it till not a bone remained. Yet when he had swallowed the last bite, his hunger burned all the more, and he said, "I will have the second as well." But the wolf was clumsy and careless. As he prowled after the second lamb, the ewe, its mother, lifted her voice in a terrible cry, bleating so loudly that the farmer came running with stick and stone. They found the wolf and beat him without mercy, until his hide was torn and his limbs were lame. Whimpering and limping, he returned to the fox and groaned, "See what thou hast brought upon me. I sought the other lamb, and the country folk caught me and beat me to a jelly." The fox, with a sly smile, only said, "Why art thou so greedy? One was enough." The very next day, though still sore from his beating, the wolf's hunger drove him again. As they passed through fields of golden stubble, the wolf growled, "Red fox, find me food, or I shall make a meal of thee." The fox, ever crafty, answered, "I know a farmhouse where the good wife bakes pancakes this very night. We may take some and feast." Together they went, and the fox slipped round the house. With sharp nose and bright eyes, he spied a dish of golden pancakes cooling by the window. He pulled down 6 of them and carried them to the wolf. "There, master, is something to fill thy belly," said he, and went his way. The wolf gobbled the pancakes so swiftly that scarcely a crumb touched his tongue. Then he licked his chops and muttered, "They are but a morsel. I must have more." So he leapt at the dish, dragged it down, and shattered it into pieces. The crash rang through the farmhouse, and the woman rushed out. When she saw the wolf, she screamed for her people. They came with clubs and cudgels and struck the wolf till their sticks splintered in their hands. With 2 lame legs, and hide bruised black and blue, he fled howling into the forest. When at last he found the fox, the wolf gasped, "Thou hast betrayed me again." The peasants laid their hands upon me and tanned my hide. But the fox, smooth-tongued, only asked, "Why art thou such a glutton? Couldst thou not be content with what I gave thee?" On the third day, though he limped sorely, and his ribs ached with every breath, the wolf's hunger returned stronger than ever. Once more he snarled, "Red fox, fetch me food, or I shall eat thee with my own jaws." The fox bowed low and said, "I know a man who has slaughtered beasts for winter. In his cellar stands a barrel brimming with salted meat. Let us fetch it." The wolf growled, "I will go, but thou must go with me, for I cannot run swiftly. If danger comes, thou shalt help me." "So be it," said the fox, and led him by hidden paths until they reached the cellar. There lay meat in great plenty. The wolf fell upon it like a starving beast, stuffing himself till the brine ran down his jaws. "Here I shall feast until the barrel is bare," he cried. The fox too tasted, but not so greedily. Ever watchful, he slipped again and again to the narrow hole by which they had entered, testing if he could still squeeze through. The wolf, who saw this, asked, "Why dost thou run to and fro, and leap in and out of the hole?" "I must keep watch that no one comes," answered the cunning fox. "Eat not too much, master, lest thou be caught." But the wolf growled, "Leave me be. I will not go until every scrap is mine." As the wolf gorged, the farmer, roused by the sound of scampering paws, came down the cellar steps with a cudgel in hand. The moment the fox caught sight of him, he sprang through the hole in a single bound, his body still lean enough to slip away. The wolf, stuffed and swollen with meat, tried to follow, but he was too fat to pass through. He wedged fast, whining and struggling. Then the farmer laid on him with the cudgel, striking blow upon blow until the wolf's howls ceased forever. And the fox? He fled into the forest, his brush waving behind him, and there he rejoiced to be free at last of the greedy, gluttonous master who had brought him nothing but trouble. The poor man and the rich man. In olden times, when the Lord himself still used to walk about on this earth amongst men, it once happened that he was tired and overtaken by the darkness before he could reach an inn. Now, there stood on the road before him 2 houses facing each other, the one large and beautiful, the other small and poor. The large one belonged to a rich man, and the small one to a poor man. Then the Lord thought, "I shall be no burden to to the rich man, "I will stay the night with him." When the rich man heard someone knocking at his door, he opened the window and asked the stranger what he wanted. The Lord answered, "I only ask for a night's lodging." Then the rich man looked at the traveler from head to foot, and as the Lord was wearing common clothes, and did not look like one who had much money in his pocket, he shook his head and said, "No, I cannot take you in. My rooms are full of herbs and seeds, and if I were to lodge everyone who knocked at my door, I might very soon go begging myself, go somewhere else for a lodging." And with this, he shut down the window and left the Lord standing there. So the Lord turned his back on the rich man and went across to the small house and knocked. He had hardly done so when the poor man opened the little door and bade the traveler come in. "Pass the night with me. It is already dark," said he. "You cannot go any further tonight." This pleased the Lord, and he went in. The poor man's wife shook hands with him and welcomed him, and said he was to make himself at home, and put up with what they had got. They had not much to offer him, but what they had they would give him with all their hearts. Then she put the potatoes on the fire, and while they were boiling, she milked the goat, that they might have a little milk with them. When the cloth was laid, the Lord sat down with the man and his wife, and he enjoyed their coarse food, for there were happy faces at the table. When they had had supper, and it was bedtime, the woman called her husband apart and said, "Hark you, dear husband, let us make up a bed of straw for ourselves tonight, and then the poor traveler can sleep in our bed and have a good rest, for he has been walking the whole day through, and that makes one weary." "With all my heart," he answered, "I will go and offer it to him." And he went to the stranger and invited him, if he had no objection, to sleep in their bed and rest his limbs properly. But the Lord was unwilling to take their bed from the two old folks. However, they would not be satisfied, until at length he did it, and lay down in their bed, while they themselves lay on some straw on the ground. Next morning, they got up before daybreak, and made as good a breakfast as they could for the guest. When the sun shone in through the little window, and the Lord had got up, he again ate with them, and then prepared to set out on his journey. But as he was standing at the door, he turned round and said, "As you are so kind and good, you may wish 3 things for yourselves, and I will grant them." Then the man said, "What else should I wish for but eternal happiness, and that we too, as long as we live, may be healthy and have every day our daily bread. For the 3rd wish, I do not know what to have." And the Lord said to him, "Will you wish for a new house instead of this old one?" "Oh yes," said the man. "If I can have that too, I should like it very much." And the Lord fulfilled his wish and changed their old house into a new one, again gave them his blessing, and went on. The sun was high when the rich man got up and leaned out of his window and saw, on the opposite side of the way, a new clean-looking house with red tiles and bright windows where the old hut used to be. He was very much astonished and called his wife and said to her, "Tell me, what can have happened? Last night there was a miserable little hut standing there, and today there is a beautiful new house. Run over and see how that has come to pass." So his wife went and asked the poor man, and he said to her, "Yesterday evening a traveler came here and asked for a night's lodging. And this morning, when he took leave of us, he granted us 3 wishes: eternal happiness, health during this life, and our daily bread as well. And besides this, a beautiful new house instead of our old hut." When the rich man's wife heard this, she ran back in haste and told her husband how it had happened. The man said, "I could tear myself to pieces if I had but known that. That traveler came to our house too and wanted to sleep here, and I sent him away." "Quick," said his wife, "get on your horse. You can still catch the man up, and then you must ask to have 3 wishes granted to you." The rich man followed the good counsel and galloped away on his horse, and soon came up with the Lord. He spoke to him softly and pleasantly, and begged him not to take it amiss that he had not let him in directly. He was looking for the front door key, and in the meantime the stranger had gone away. If he returned the same way, he must come and stay with him. "Yes," said the Lord, "if I ever come back again, I will do so." Then the rich man asked if might not wish for 3 things too, as his neighbor had done. "Yes," said the Lord, "he might, but it would not be to his advantage, and he had better not wish for anything." But the rich man thought that he could easily ask for something which would add to his happiness, if he only knew that it would be granted. So the Lord said to him, "Ride home then, and 3 wishes which you shall form shall be fulfilled." The rich man had now gained what he wanted, so he rode home and began to consider what he should wish for. As he was thus thinking, he let the bridle fall, and the horse began to caper about, so that he was continually disturbed in his meditations, and could not collect his thoughts at all. He patted its neck and said, "Gently, Lisa." But the horse only began new tricks. Then at last he was angry and cried quite impatiently, I wish your neck was broken." Directly he had said the words, down the horse fell on the ground, and there it lay dead and never moved again. And thus was his first wish fulfilled. As he was miserly by nature, he did not like to leave the harness lying there, so he cut it off and put it on his back, and now he had to go on foot. "I have still 2 wishes left," said he, and comforted himself with that thought. And now, as he was walking slowly through the sand, and the sun was burning hot at noonday, he grew quite hot-tempered and angry. The saddle hurt his back, and he had not yet any idea what to wish for. "If I were to wish for all the riches and treasures in the world," said he to himself, "I should still to think of all kinds of other things later on. I know that beforehand. But I will manage so that there is nothing at all left me to wish for afterwards." Then he sighed and said, "Ah, if I were but that Bavarian peasant, who likewise had 3 wishes granted to him, and knew quite well what to do, and in the first place wished for a great deal of beer, and in the second for as much beer as he was able to drink, and in the third for a barrel of beer into the bargain. Many a time he thought he had found it, but then it seemed to him to be, after all, too little. Then it came into his mind what an easy life his wife had, for she stayed at home in a cool room and enjoyed herself. This really did vex him, and before he was aware, he said, "I just wish she was sitting there on this saddle and could not get off it, instead of my having to drag it along on my back." And as the last word was spoken, the saddle disappeared from his back, and he saw that his second wish had been fulfilled. Then he really did feel warm. He began to run and wanted to be quite alone in his own room at home, to think of something really large for his last wish. But when he arrived there and opened the parlor door, he saw his wife sitting in the middle of the room on the saddle, crying and complaining, and quite unable to get off it. So he said, "Do bear it, and I will wish for all the riches on earth for thee. Only stay where thou art." She, however, called him a fool and said, "What good will all the riches on earth do me if I am to sit on this saddle? Thou hast wished me on it, so thou must help me off." So whether he would or not, he was forced to let his third wish be that she should be quit of the saddle and able to get off it. And immediately the wish was fulfilled. So he got nothing by it but vexation, trouble, abuse, and the loss of his horse. But the poor people lived happily, quietly, and piously until their happy death. The Robber Bridegroom. There was once a miller who had a beautiful daughter, and when she was grown up, he became anxious that she should be well married and taken care of. So he thought, If a decent sort of man comes and asks her in marriage, I will give her to him." Soon after, a suitor came forward, who seemed very well-to-do, and as the miller knew nothing to his disadvantage, he promised him his daughter. But the girl did not seem to love him as a bride should love her bridegroom. She had no confidence in him. As often as she saw him or thought about him, she felt a chill at her heart. One day, he said to her, "You are to be my bride, and yet you have never been to see me." The girl answered, "I do not know where your house is." Then he said, "My house is a long way in the wood." She began to make excuses and said she could not find the way to it. But the bridegroom said, "You must come and pay me a visit next Sunday. I have already invited company, and I will strew ashes on the path through the wood, so that you will be sure to find it." When Sunday came, and the girl set out on her way, she felt very uneasy without knowing exactly why, and she filled both pockets full of peas and lentils. There were ashes strewed on the path through the wood, but nevertheless, at each step, she cast to the right and left a few peas on the ground. So she went on the whole day until she came to the middle of the wood, where it was the darkest, and there stood a lonely house, not pleasant in her eyes, for it was dismal and unhomelike. She walked in, but there was no one there, and the greatest stillness reigned. Suddenly she heard a voice cry, turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide." The girl glanced round and perceived that the voice came from a bird who was hanging in a cage by the wall. And again it cried, turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide, for here do evil things betide." Then the pretty bride went on from one room into another, through the whole house, but it was quite empty, and no soul to be found in it. At last she reached the cellar, and there sat a very old woman, nodding her head. "Can you tell me," said the bride, "if my bridegroom lives here?" "Oh, poor child," answered the old woman, "do you know what has happened to you? You are in a place of cutthroats. You thought you were a bride, and soon to be married, but death will be your spouse. Look here, I have a great kettle of water to set on, and when once they have you in their power, they will cut you in pieces without mercy, cook you, and eat you, for they are cannibals. Unless I have pity on you and save you, all is over with you." Then the old woman hid her behind a great cask, where she could not be seen. "Be as still as a mouse," said she. "Do not move or go away, or else you are lost. At night, when the robbers are asleep, we will escape. I have been waiting a long time for an opportunity." No sooner was it settled than the wicked gang entered the house. They brought another young woman with them, dragging her along. And they were drunk and would not listen to her cries and groans. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, one of white wine, one of red, and one of yellow. And then they cut her in pieces. The poor bride, all the while shaking and trembling when she saw what a fate the robbers had intended for her. One of them noticed on the little finger of their victim a golden ring, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took an axe and chopped it off. But the finger jumped away and fell behind the cask on the bride's lap. The robber took up a light to look for it, but he could not find it. Then said one of the others, "Have you looked behind the great cask?" But the old woman cried, "Come to supper and leave off looking till tomorrow. The finger cannot run away." Then the robbers said the old woman was right, and they left off searching and sat down to eat. And the old woman dropped some sleeping stuff into their wine, so that before long they stretched themselves on the cellar floor, sleeping and snoring. When the bride heard that, she came from behind the cask and had to make her way among the sleepers lying all about on the ground. And she felt very much afraid lest she might awaken any of them. But by good luck she passed through, and the old woman with her. And they opened the door, and they made all haste to leave that house of murderers. The wind had carried away the ashes from the path, but the peas and lentils had budded and sprung up, and the moonshine upon them showed the way. And they went on through the night, till in the morning they reached the mill. Then the girl related to her father all that had happened to her. When the wedding day came, the friends and neighbors assembled, the miller having invited them, and the bridegroom also appeared. When they were all seated at table, each one had to tell a story. But the bride sat still and said nothing, till at last the bridegroom said to her, "Now, sweetheart, do you know no story? Tell us something." She answered, "I will tell you my dream. I was going alone through a wood, and I came at last to a house in which there was no living soul. But by the wall was a bird in a cage, who cried, 'Turn back, turn back, thou pretty bride. Within this house thou must not bide, for evil things do here betide.' And then again it said it. Sweetheart, the dream is not ended." Then I went through all the rooms, and they were all empty, and it was lonely and wretched. At last I went down into the cellar, and there sat an old woman, nodding her head. I asked her if my bridegroom lived in that house. And she answered, "Ah, poor child, you have come into a place of cutthroats. Your bridegroom does live here, but he will kill you and cut you in pieces, and then cook and eat you. Sweetheart, the dream is not ended, but the old woman hid me behind a great cask, and no sooner had she done so than the robbers came home, dragging with them a young woman, and they gave her to drink wine thrice, white, red, and yellow. Sweetheart, the dream is not yet ended." And then they killed her and cut her in pieces. Sweetheart, my dream is not yet ended. And one of the robbers saw a gold ring on the finger of the young woman, and as it was difficult to get off, he took an axe and chopped off the finger, which jumped upwards, and then fell behind the great cask on my lap. And here is the finger with the ring. At these words, she drew it forth and showed it to the company. The robber, who during the story had grown deadly white, sprang up and would have escaped, but the folks held him fast and delivered him up to justice, and he and his whole gang were, for their evil deeds, condemned and executed. The 12 Brothers. There were once on a time a king and a queen who lived happily together and had 12 children, but they were all boys. Then said the king to his wife, "If the 13th child, which thou art about to bring into the world, is a girl, the 12 boys shall die, in order that her possessions may be great, and that the kingdom may fall to her alone." He caused likewise 12 coffins to be made, which were already filled with shavings, and in each lay the little pillow for the dead. And he had them taken into a locked-up room, and then he gave the queen the key of it, and bade her not to speak of this to anyone. The mother, however, now sat and lamented all day long, until the youngest son, who was always with her, and whom she had named Benjamin from the Bible, said to her, "Dear mother, why art thou so sad?" "Dearest child," she answered, "I may not tell thee." But he let her have no rest until she went and unlocked the room, and showed him the 12 coffins ready filled with shavings. Then she said, "My dearest Benjamin, thy father has had these coffins made for thee, and for thy 11 brothers. For if I bring a little girl into the world, you are all to be killed and buried in them." And as she wept while she was saying this, the son comforted her and said, "Weep not, dear mother, we will save ourselves and go hence." But she said, "Go forth into the forest with thy 11 brothers, and let one sit constantly on the highest tree which can be found, and keep watch, looking towards the tower here in the castle. If I give birth to a little son, I will put up a white flag, and then you may venture to come back. But if I bear a daughter, I will hoist a red flag, and then fly hence as quickly as you are able. And may the good God protect you, and every night I will rise up and pray for you. In winter, that you may be able to warm yourself at a fire, and in summer, that you may not faint away in the heat. After she had blessed her sons, therefore, they went forth into the forest. They each kept watch in turn, and sat on the highest oak, and looked towards the tower. When 11 days had passed, and the turn came to Benjamin, he saw that a flag was being raised. It was, however, not the white, but the blood-red flag, which announced that they were all to die. When the brothers heard that, they were very angry, and said, "Are we all to suffer death for the sake of a girl? We swear that we will avenge ourselves. Wheresoever we find a girl, her red blood shall flow." Thereupon they went deeper into the forest, and in the midst of it, where it was the darkest, they found a little bewitched hut, which was standing empty. Then said they, "Here we will dwell. And thou, Benjamin, who art the youngest and weakest, thou shalt stay at home and keep house. We others will go out and get food." Then they went into the forest and shot hares, wild deer, birds and pigeons, and whatsoever there was to eat. This they took to Benjamin, who had to dress it for them, in order that they might appease their hunger. They lived together 10 years in the little hut. And the time did not appear long to them. The little daughter, which their mother, the queen, had given birth to, was now grown up. She was good of heart, and fair of face, and had a golden star on her forehead. Once, when it was the great washing, she saw 12 men's shirts among the things, and asked her mother, "To whom do these 12 shirts belong? For they are far too small for father." Then the queen answered, with a heavy heart, "Dear child, these belong to thy 12 brothers." Said the maiden, "Where are my 12 brothers? I have never yet heard of them." She replied, "God knows where they are. They are wandering about the world." Then she took the maiden and opened the chamber for her, and showed her the 12 coffins with the shavings and pillows for the head. "These coffins," said she, "were destined for thy brothers, but they went away secretly before thou wert born." And she related to her how everything had happened. Then said the maiden, "Dear mother, weep not. I will go and seek my brothers." So she took the 12 shirts and went forth, and straight into the great forest. She walked the whole day, and in the evening she came to the bewitched hut. Then she entered it and found a young boy who asked, "From whence comest thou, and whither art thou bound?" and was astonished that she was so beautiful, and wore royal garments, and had a star on her forehead. And she answered, "I am a king's daughter, and am seeking my 12 brothers, and I will walk as far as the sky is blue until I find them." She likewise showed him the 12 shirts which belonged to them. Then Benjamin saw that she was his sister, and said, "I am Benjamin, thy youngest brother." And she began to weep for joy, and Benjamin wept also, and they kissed and embraced each other with the greatest love. But after this he said, "Dear sister, there is still one difficulty. We have agreed that every maiden whom we meet shall die, because we have been obliged to leave our kingdom on account of a girl." Then said she, "I will willingly die, if by so doing I can deliver my 12 brothers." "No," answered he, "thou shalt not die. Seat thyself beneath this tub until our 11 brothers come, and then I will soon come to an agreement with them." She did so, and when it was night, the others came from hunting, and their dinner was ready. And as they were sitting at table and eating, they asked, "What news is there?" Said Benjamin, "Don't you know anything?" "No," they answered. He continued, "You have been in the forest, and I have stayed at home, and yet I know more than you do." "Tell us then," they cried. He answered, "But promise me that the first maiden who meets us shall not be killed." "Yes," they all cried, "she shall have mercy. Only do tell us." Then said he, "Our sister is here." And he lifted up the tub, and the king's daughter came forth in her royal garments with the golden star on her forehead. And she was beautiful, delicate, and fair. Then they were all rejoiced, and fell on her neck, and kissed and loved her with all their hearts. Now she stayed at home with Benjamin and helped him with the work. The 11 went into the forest and caught game, and deer, and birds, and wood pigeons, that they might have food. And the little sister and Benjamin took care to make it ready for them. She sought for the wood for cooking, and herbs for vegetables, and put the pans on the fire, so that the dinner was always ready when the 11 came. She likewise kept order in the little house, and put beautifully white, clean coverings on the little beds. And the brothers were always contented, and lived in great harmony with her. Once on a time, the 2 at home had prepared a beautiful entertainment. And when they were all together, they sat down and ate and drank, and were full of gladness. There was, however, a little garden belonging to the bewitched house, wherein stood 12 lily flowers, which are likewise called students. She wished to give her brothers pleasure, and plucked the 12 flowers, and thought she would present each brother with one while at dinner. But at the self-same moment that she plucked the flowers, the 12 brothers were changed into 12 ravens, and flew away over the forest, and the house and garden vanished likewise. And now the poor maiden was alone in the wild forest, and when she looked around, an old woman was standing near her, who said, "My child, what hast thou done? Why didst thou not leave the 12 white flowers growing? They were thy brothers, who are now forevermore changed into ravens." The maiden said, weeping, "Is there no way of delivering them?" "No," said the woman. "There is but one in the whole world, and that is so hard that thou wilt not deliver them by it. For thou must be dumb for 7 years, and mayst not speak or laugh. And if thou speakest one single word, and only an hour of the 7 years is wanting, all is in vain, and thy brothers will be killed by the one word." Then said the maiden in her heart, "I know with certainty that I shall set my brothers free," and went and sought a high tree, and seated herself in it, and span, and neither spoke nor laughed. Now it so happened that a king was hunting in the forest, who had a great greyhound, which ran to the tree on which the maiden was sitting, and sprang about it, whining and barking at her. Then the king came by, and saw the beautiful king's daughter with the golden star on her brow, and was so charmed with her beauty that he called to ask her if she would be his wife. She made no answer, but nodded a little with her head. So he climbed up the tree himself, carried her down, placed her on his horse, and bore her home. Then the wedding was solemnized with great magnificence and rejoicing. But the bride neither spoke nor smiled. When they had lived happily together for a few years, the king's mother, who was a wicked woman, began to slander the young queen, and said to the king, "This is a common beggar girl, whom thou hast brought back with thee. Who knows what impious tricks she practices secretly? Even if she be dumb and not able to speak, she still might laugh for once. But those who do not laugh have bad consciences." At first the king would not believe it, but the old woman urged this so long, and accused her of so many evil things, that at last the king let himself be persuaded, and sentenced her to death. And now a great fire was lighted in the courtyard in which she was to be burnt. And the king stood above at the window and looked on with tearful eyes, because he still loved her so much. And when she was bound fast to the stake, and the fire was licking at her clothes with its red tongue, the last instant of the 7 years expired. Then a whirring sound was heard in the air, and 12 ravens came flying towards the place and sank downwards. And when they touched the earth, they were her 12 brothers, whom she had delivered. They tore the fire asunder, extinguished the flames, set their dear sister free, and kissed and embraced her. And now, as she dared to open her mouth and speak, she told the king why she had been dumb and had never laughed. The king rejoiced when he heard that she was innocent, and they all lived in great unity until their death. The wicked stepmother was taken before the judge and put into a barrel filled with boiling oil and venomous snakes, and died an evil death. The story of the youth who went forth to learn what fear was. A certain father had 2 sons, the elder of whom was smart and sensible and could do everything, but the younger was stupid and could neither learn nor understand anything. And when people saw him, they said, "There's a fellow who will give his father some trouble." When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it. But if his father bade him fetch anything when it was late or in the night time, and the way led through the churchyard or any other dismal place, he answered, "Oh no, Father, I'll not go there. It makes me shudder." For he was afraid. Or when stories were told by the fire at night, which made the flesh creep, the listeners sometimes said, "Oh, it makes us shudder." The younger sat in a corner and listened with the rest of them, and could not imagine what they could mean. They are always saying, "It makes me shudder. It makes me shudder." "It does not make me shudder," thought he. "That too must be an art of which I understand nothing." Now it came to pass that his father said to him one day, "Hearken to me, thou fellow in the corner there. Thou art growing tall and strong, and thou too must learn something by which thou canst earn thy living. Look how thy brother works, but thou dost not even earn thy salt." "Well, father," he replied, "I am quite willing to learn something. Indeed, if it could but be managed, I should like to learn how to shudder. I don't understand that at all yet." The elder brother smiled when he heard that, and thought to himself, "Good God, what a blockhead that brother of mine is. He will never be good for anything as long as he lives. He who wants to be a sickle must bend himself betimes." The father sighed and answered him, "Thou shalt soon learn what it is to shudder, but thou wilt not earn thy bread by that." Soon after this, the sexton came to the house on a visit, and the father bewailed his trouble and told him how his younger son was so backward in every respect that he knew nothing and learnt nothing. "Just think," said he, When I asked him how he was going to earn his bread, he actually wanted to learn to shudder. "If that be all," replied the sexton, "he can learn that with me. Send him to me, and I will soon polish him." The father was glad to do it, for he thought, "It will train the boy a little." The sexton therefore took him into his house, and he had to ring the bell. After a day or two, the sexton awoke him at midnight and bade him arise and go up into the church tower and ring the bell. "Thou shalt soon learn what shuddering is," thought he, and secretly went there before him. And when the boy was at the top of the tower and turned round, and was just going to take hold of the bell rope, he saw a white figure standing on the stairs opposite the sounding hole. "Who is there?" cried he. But the figure made no reply, and did not move or stir. "Give an answer," cried the boy, "or take thyself off. Thou hast no business here at night." The sexton, however, remained standing motionless, that the boy might think he was a ghost. The boy cried a second time, "What do you want here? Speak if thou art an honest fellow, or I will throw thee down the steps." The sexton thought, "He can't intend to be as bad as his words," uttered no sound, and stood as if he were made of stone. Then the boy called to him for the third time, and as that was also to no purpose, he ran against him and pushed the ghost down the stairs, so that it fell down 10 steps and remained lying there in a corner. Thereupon he rang the bell, went home, and without saying a word, went to bed and fell asleep. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband, but he did not come back. At length she became uneasy and wakened the boy and asked, "Dost thou not know where my husband is? He climbed up the tower before thou didst." "No, I don't know," replied the boy. "But someone was standing by the sounding hole on the other side of the steps, and as he would neither give an answer nor go away, I took him for a scoundrel and threw him downstairs. Just go there and you will see if it was he. I should be sorry if it were." The woman ran away and found her husband, who was lying moaning in the corner and had broken his leg. She carried him down, and then with loud screams she hastened to the boy's father. "Your boy," cried she, "has been the cause of a great misfortune. He has thrown my husband down the steps and made him break his leg. Take the good-for-nothing fellow away from our house." The father was terrified and ran thither and scolded the boy. "What wicked tricks are these?" said he. "The devil must have put this into thy head." "Father," he replied, "do listen to me. I am quite innocent. He was standing there by night like one who is intending to do some evil. I did not know who it was, and I entreated him 3 times, either to speak or to go away. "Ah," said the father, "I have nothing but unhappiness with you. Go out of my sight. I will see thee no more." "Yes, father, right willingly. Wait only until it is day. Then will I go forth and learn how to shudder. And then I shall, at any rate, understand one art which will support me." "Learn what thou wilt," spake the father. "It is all the same to me. Here are 50 thalers for thee. Take these and go into the wide world, and tell no one from whence thou comest, and who is thy father, for I have reason to be ashamed of thee." "Yes, father, it shall be as you will. If you desire nothing more than that, I can easily keep it in mind." When day dawned, therefore, the boy put his 50 thalers into his pocket and went forth on the great highway, and continually said to himself, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" Then a man approached, who heard this conversation which the youth was holding with himself. And when they had walked a little farther, to where they could see the gallows, the man said to him, "Look, there is the tree where 7 men have married the ropemaker's daughter, and are now learning how to fly. Sit down below it, and wait till night comes, and you will soon learn how to shudder." "If that is all that is wanted," answered the youth, "it is easily done. But if I learn how to shudder as fast as that, thou shalt have my 50 thalers. Just come back to me early in the morning." Then the youth went to the gallows, sat down below it, and waited till evening came. And as he was cold, he lighted himself a fire. But at midnight, the wind blew so sharply that in spite of his fire, he could not get warm. And as the wind knocked the hanged men against each other, and they moved backwards and forwards, he thought to himself, "Thou shiverest below by the fire, but how those up above must freeze and suffer." And as he felt pity for them, he raised the ladder and climbed up, unbound one of them after the other, and brought down all 7. Then he stirred the fire, blew it, and set them all round it to warm themselves. But they sat there and did not stir, and the fire caught their clothes. So he said, "Take care, or I will hang you up again." The dead men, however, did not hear, but were quite silent, and let their rags go on burning. On this he grew angry, and said, "If you will not take care, I cannot help you. I will not be burnt with you." And he hung them up again, each in his turn. Then he sat down by his fire and fell asleep. And the next morning the man came to him and wanted to have the 50 thalers, and said, "Well, dost thou know how to shudder?" "No," answered he. "How was I to get to know? Those fellows up there did not open their mouths, and were so stupid that they let the few old rags which they had on their bodies get burnt. Then the man saw that he would not get the 50 thalers that day, and went away, saying, "One of this kind has never come my way before." The youth likewise went his way, and once more began to mutter to himself, "Ah, if I could but shudder. Ah, if I could but shudder." A wagoner who was striding behind him heard that, and asked, "Who are you?" "I don't know," answered the youth. Then the wagoner asked, "From whence comest thou?" "I know not." "Who is thy father, that I may not tell thee? What is it that thou art always muttering between thy teeth?" "Ah," replied the youth, "I do so wish I could shudder, but no one can teach me how to do it." "Give up thy foolish chatter," said the wagoner. "Come, go with me. I will see about a place for thee." The youth went with the wagoner, and in the evening they arrived at an inn where they wished to pass the night. Then, at the entrance of the room, the youth again said quite loudly, "If I could but shudder. If I could but shudder." The host, who heard this, laughed and said, "If that is your desire, there ought to be a good opportunity for you here." "Ah, be silent," said the hostess. "So many inquisitive persons have already lost their lives. It would be a pity and a shame if such beautiful eyes as these should never see the daylight again." But the youth said, "However difficult it may be, I will learn it, and for this purpose indeed have I journeyed forth." He let the host have no rest until the latter told him that not far from thence stood a haunted castle where anyone could very easily learn what shuddering was, if he would but watch in it for 3 nights. The king had promised that he who would venture should have his daughter to wife, and she was the most beautiful maiden the sun shone on. Great treasures likewise lay in the castle, which were guarded by evil spirits, and these treasures would then be freed, and would make a poor man rich enough. Already many men had gone into the castle, but as yet none had come out again. Then the youth went next morning to the king, and said if he were allowed, he would watch 3 nights in the haunted castle. The king looked at him, and as the youth pleased him, he said, "Thou mayest ask for 3 things to take into the castle with thee, but they must be things without life." Then he answered, "Then I ask for a fire, a turning lathe, and a cutting board with the knife." The king had these things carried into the castle for him during the day. When night was drawing near, the youth went up and made himself a bright fire in one of the rooms, placed the cutting board and knife beside it, and seated himself by the turning lathe. "Ah, if I could but shudder," said he, "but I shall not learn it here either." Towards midnight, he was about to poke his fire, and as he was blowing it, something cried suddenly from one corner, "Ow, meow, how cold we are." "You simpletons," cried he, "what are you crying about? If you are cold, come and take a seat by the fire and warm yourselves." And when he had said that, 2 great black cats came with one tremendous leap and sat down on each side of him and looked savagely at him with their fiery eyes. After a short time, when they had warmed themselves, they said, "Comrade, shall we have a game at cards?" "Why not?" he replied, "but just show me your paws." Then they stretched out their claws. "Oh," said he, "what long nails you have. Wait, I must first cut them for you." Thereupon he seized them by the throats, put them on the cutting board, and screwed their feet fast. "I have looked at your fingers," said he, "and my fancy for card playing has gone." And he struck them dead and threw them out into the water. But when he had made away with these 2, and was about to sit down again by his fire, out from every hole and corner came black cats and black dom with red-hot chains. And more of them came until he could no longer stir. And they yelled horribly, and got on his fire, pulled it to pieces, and tried to put it out. He watched them for a while quietly, but at last, when they were going too far, he seized his cutting knife and cried, "Away with ye, vermin," and began to cut them down. Part of them ran away, the others he killed, and threw out into the fish pond. When he came back, he fanned the embers of his fire again and warmed himself. And as he thus sat, his eyes would keep open no longer, and he felt a desire to sleep. Then he looked round and saw a great bed in the corner. "That is the very thing for me," said he, and got into it. When he was just going to shut his eyes, however, the bed began to move of its own accord and went over the whole of the castle. "That's right," said he, "but go faster." Then the bed rolled on as if 6 horses were harnessed to it, up and down, over thresholds and steps. But suddenly, hop, hop, it turned over upside down and lay on him like a mountain. But he threw quilts and pillows up in the air, got out, and said, "Now anyone who likes may drive," and lay down by his fire and slept till it was day. In the morning the king came, and when he saw him lying there on the ground, he thought the evil spirits had killed him, and he was dead. Then said he, "After all, it is a pity. He is a handsome man." The youth heard it, got up, and said, "It has not come to that yet." Then the king was astonished, but very glad, and asked how he had fared. "Very well indeed," answered he. "One night is past, the 2 others will get over likewise." Then he went to the innkeeper, who opened his eyes very wide and said, "I never expected to see thee alive again. Hast thou learnt how to shudder yet?" "No," said he. "It is all in vain. If someone would but tell me." The second night, he again went up into the old castle, sat down by the fire, and once more began his old song, "If I could but shudder." When midnight came, an uproar and noise of tumbling about was heard. At first it was low, but it grew louder and louder. Then it was quiet for a while, and at length, with a loud scream, half a man came down the chimney and fell before him. "Hullo!" cried he, "another half belongs to this. This is too little." Then the uproar began again. There was a roaring and howling, and the other half fell down likewise. "Wait," said he, "I will just blow up the fire a little for thee." When he had done that, and looked round again, the two pieces were joined together, and a frightful man was sitting in his place. "That is no part of our bargain," said the youth. "The bench is mine." The man wanted to push him away. The youth, however, would not allow that, but thrust him off with all his strength, and seated himself again in his own place. Then still more men fell down, one after the other. They brought 9 dead men's legs and 2 skulls, and set them up, and played at 9 pins with them. The youth also wanted to play, and said, "Hark you, can I join you?" "Yes, if thou hast any money." "Money enough," replied he, "but your balls are not quite round." Then he took the skulls, and put them in the lathe, and turned them till they were round. "There, now they will roll better," said he. "Hurrah! Now it goes merrily." He played with them, and lost some of his money. But when it struck 12, everything vanished from his sight. He lay down and quietly fell asleep. Next morning, the king came to inquire after him. "How has it fared with you this time?" asked he. "I have been playing at 9 pins," he answered, "and have lost a couple of farthings." "Hast thou not shuddered then?" "Eh? What?" said he. "I have made merry. If I did but know what it was to shudder." The third night he sat down again on his bench, and said quite sadly, "If I could but shudder." When it grew late, 6 tall men came in and brought a coffin. Then said he, "Ha, ha, that is certainly my little cousin, who died only a few days ago." And he beckoned with his finger, and cried, "Come, little cousin, come." They placed the coffin on the ground, but he went to it, and took the lid off, and a dead man lay therein. He felt his face, but it was cold as ice. "Stop," said he, "I will warm thee a little," and went to the fire and warmed his hand, and laid it on the dead man's face, but he remained cold. Then he took him out and sat down by the fire and laid him on his breast and rubbed his arms that the blood might circulate again. As this also did no good, he thought to himself, "When two people lie in bed together, they warm each other," and carried him to the bed, covered him over, and lay down by him. After a short time, the dead man became warm too, and began to move. Then said the youth, "See, little cousin, have I not warmed thee?" The dead man, however, got up and cried, "Now will I strangle thee." "What?" said he. "Is that the way thou thankest me? Thou shalt at once go into thy coffin again." And he took him up, threw him into it, and shut the lid. Then came the 6 men and carried him away again. "I cannot manage to shudder," said he. "I shall never learn it here as long as I live." Then a man entered who was taller than all others and looked terrible. He was old, however, and had a long white beard. "Thou wretch," cried he, "thou shalt soon learn what it is to shudder, for thou shalt die." "Not so fast," replied the youth. "If I am to die, I shall have to have a say in it." "I will soon seize thee," said the fiend. "Softly, softly, do not talk so big. I am as strong as thou art, and perhaps even stronger." "We shall see," said the old man. "If thou art stronger, I will let thee go. Come, we will try." Then he led him by dark passages to a smith's forge, took an axe, and with one blow struck an anvil into the ground. "I can do better than that," said the youth, and went to the other anvil. The old man placed himself near and wanted to look on, and his white beard hung down. Then the youth seized the axe, split the anvil with one blow, and struck the old man's beard in with it. "Now I have thee," said the youth. "Now it is thou who will have to die." Then he seized an iron bar and beat the old man till he moaned and entreated him to stop, and he would give him great riches. The youth drew out the axe and let him go. The old man led him back into the castle, and in a cellar showed him 3 chests full of gold. "Of these," said he, "one part is for the poor, the other for the king, the third is thine." In the meantime, it struck 12, and the spirit disappeared. The youth, therefore, was left in darkness. "I shall still be able to find my way out," said he, and felt about, found the way into the room, and slept there by his fire. Next morning, the king came and said, "Now thou must have learnt what shuddering is." "No," he answered, "what can it be?" "My dead cousin was here, and a bearded man came and showed me a great deal of money down below, but no one told me what it was to shudder. Then, said the king, thou hast delivered the castle, and shalt marry my daughter. That is all very well, said he, but still I do not know what it is to shudder. Then the gold was brought up, and the wedding celebrated. But howsoever much the young king loved his wife, and however happy he was, he still said always, if I could but shudder, if I could but shudder. And at last she was angry at this. Her waiting maid said, I will find a cure for him. He shall soon learn what it is to shudder. She went out to the stream which flowed through the garden, and had a whole bucketful of gudgeons brought to her. At night, when the young king was sleeping, his wife was to draw the clothes off him and empty the bucketful of cold water with the gudgeons in it over him, so that the little fishes would sprawl about him. When this was done, he woke up and cried, Oh, what makes me shudder so? What makes me shudder so, dear wife? Ah, now I know what it is to shudder. The Girl Without Hands. A certain miller had little by little fallen into poverty, and had nothing left but his mill and a large apple tree behind it. Once, when he had gone into the forest to fetch wood, an old man stepped up to him, whom he had never seen before, and said, Why dost thou plague thyself with cutting wood? I will make thee rich, if thou wilt promise me what is standing behind thy mill. What can that be but my apple tree? Thought the miller, and said, Yes, and gave a written promise to the stranger. He, however, laughed mockingly and said, When 3 years have passed, I will come and carry away what belongs to me. And then he went. When the miller got home, his wife came to meet him and said, Tell me, miller, from whence comes this sudden wealth into our house? All at once, every box and chest was filled. No one brought it in, and I know not how it happened. He answered, It comes from a stranger who met me in the forest and promised me great treasure. I, in return, have promised him what stands behind the mill. We can very well give him the big apple tree for it. Ah, husband, said the terrified wife, that must have been the devil. He did not mean the apple tree, but our daughter, who was standing behind the mill, sweeping the yard. The miller's daughter was a beautiful, pious girl, and lived through the 3 years in the fear of God and without sin. When therefore the time was over, and the day came when the evil one was to fetch her, she washed herself clean, and made a circle round herself with chalk. The devil appeared quite early, but he could not come near to her. Angrily, he said to the miller, Take all water away from her, that she may no longer be able to wash herself, for otherwise I have no power over her. The miller was afraid, and did so. The next morning, the devil came again, but she had wept on her hands, and they were quite clean. Again, he could not get near her, and furiously said to the miller, "Cut her hands off, or else I cannot get the better of her." The miller was shocked and answered, "How could I cut off my own child's hands?" Then the evil one threatened him and said, "If thou dost not do it, thou art mine, and I will take thee thyself." The father became alarmed and promised to obey him. So he went to the girl and said, "My child, if I do not cut off both thine hands, the devil will carry me away, and in my terror I have promised to do it. Help me in my need, and forgive me the harm I do thee." She replied, "Dear father, do with me what you will. I am your child." Thereupon she laid down both her hands and let them be cut off. The devil came for the third time, but she had wept so long and so much on the stumps that after all they were quite clean. Then he had to give in, and had lost all right over her. The miller said to her, "I have by means of thee received such great wealth that I will keep thee most delicately as long as thou livest." But she replied, "Here I cannot stay. I will go forth. Compassionate people will give me as much as I require." Thereupon she caused her maimed arms to be bound to her back, and by sunrise she set out on her way, and walked the whole day until night fell. Then she came to a royal garden, and by the shimmering of the moon she saw that trees covered with beautiful fruits grew in it. But she could not enter, for there was much water round about it. And as she had walked the whole day and not eaten one mouthful, and hunger tormented her, she thought, "Ah, if I were but inside, that I might eat of the fruit, else must I die of hunger." Then she knelt down, called on God the Lord, and prayed. And suddenly an angel came towards her, who made a dam in the water, so that the moat became dry, and she could walk through it. And now she went into the garden, and the angel went with her. She saw a tree covered with beautiful pears, but they were all counted. Then she went to them, and to still her hunger, ate one with her mouth from the tree, but no more. The gardener was watching, but as the angel was standing by, he was afraid, and thought the maiden was a spirit, and was silent. Neither did he dare to cry out, or to speak to the spirit. When she had eaten the pear, she was satisfied, and went and concealed herself among the bushes. The king to whom the garden belonged came down to it next morning, and counted, and saw that one of the pears was missing, and asked the gardener what had become of it, as it was not lying beneath the tree, but was gone Then answered the gardener, "Last night a spirit came in, who had no hands, and ate off one of the pears with its mouth." The king said, "How did the spirit get over the water? And where did it go after it had eaten the pear?" The gardener answered, "Someone came in a snow-white garment from heaven, who made a dam and kept back the water, that the spirit might walk through the moat. And as it must have been an angel, I was afraid, and asked no questions, and did not cry out. When the spirit had eaten the pear, it went back again." The king said, "If it be as thou sayest, I will watch with thee tonight." When it grew dark, the king came into the garden and brought a priest with him, who was to speak to the spirit. All three seated themselves beneath the tree and watched. At midnight, the maiden came creeping out of the thicket, went to the tree, and again ate one pear off it with her mouth, and beside her stood the angel in white garments. Then the priest went out to them and said, "Comest thou from heaven or from earth? Art thou a spirit or a human being?" She replied, "I am no spirit, but an unhappy mortal, deserted by all but God." The king said, "If thou art forsaken by all the world, yet will I not forsake thee." He took her with him into his royal palace, and as she was so beautiful and good, he loved her with all his heart, had silver hands made for her, and took her to wife. After a year, the king had to take the field, so he commended his young queen to the care of his mother, and said, "If she is brought to bed, take care of her, nurse her well, and tell me of it at once in a letter." Then she gave birth to a fine boy. So the old mother made haste to write and announce the joyful news to him. But the messenger rested by a brook on the way, and as he was fatigued by the great distance, he fell asleep. Then came the devil, who was always seeking to injure the good queen, and exchanged the letter for another, in which was written that the queen had brought a monster into the world. When the king read the letter, he was shocked and much troubled, but he wrote in answer that they were to take great care of the queen and nurse her well until his arrival. The messenger went back with the letter, but rested at the same place, and again fell asleep. Then came the devil once more, and put a different letter in his pocket, in which it was written that they were to put the queen and her child to death. The old mother was terribly shocked when she received the letter, and could not believe it. She wrote back again to the king, but received no other answer, because each time the devil substituted a false letter. And in the last letter, it was also written that she was to preserve the queen's tongue and eyes as a token that she had obeyed. But the old mother wept to think such innocent blood was to be shed, and had a hind brought by night, and cut out her tongue and eyes, and kept them. Then said she to the queen, I cannot have thee killed as the king commands, but here thou mayest stay no longer. Go forth into the wide world with thy child, and never come here again. The poor woman tied her child on her back and went away with eyes full of tears. She came into a great wild forest, and then she fell on her knees and prayed to God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to her and led her to a little house on which was a sign with the words, Here all dwell free. A snow-white maiden came out of the little house and said, Welcome, Lady Queen, and conducted her inside. Then they unbound the little boy from her back and held him to her breast that he might feed, and laid him in a beautifully made little bed. Then said the poor woman, From whence knowest thou that I was a queen? The white maiden answered, I am an angel sent by God to watch over thee and thy child. The queen stayed 7 years in the little house and was well cared for, and by God's grace, because of her piety, her hands, which had been cut off, grew once more. At last, the king came home again from the war, and his first wish was to see his wife and the child. Then his aged mother began to weep, and said, Thou wicked man, why didst thou write to me that I was to take those 2 innocent lives? And she showed him the 2 letters which the evil one had forged, and then continued, I did as thou badest me. And she showed the tokens, the tongue and eyes. Then the king began to weep for his poor wife and his little son so much more bitterly than she was doing, that the aged mother had compassion on him and said, Be at peace, she still lives. I secretly caused a hind to be killed, and took these tokens from it. But I bound the child to thy wife's back, and bade her go forth into the wide world, and made her promise never to come back here again, because thou wert so angry with her. Then spoke the king, I will go as far as the sky is blue, and will neither eat nor drink until I have found again my dear wife and my child, if in the meantime they have not been killed or died of hunger. Thereupon the king traveled about for 7 long years, and sought her in every cleft of the rocks and in every cave. But he found her not, and thought she had died of want. During the whole of this time, he neither ate nor drank. But God supported him. At length he came into a great forest, and found therein the little house whose sign was, Here all dwell free. Then forth came the white maiden, took him by the hand, led him in, and said, Welcome, Lord King. and asked him from whence he came. He answered, "Soon shall I have traveled about for the space of 7 years, and I seek my wife and her child, but cannot find them." The angel offered him meat and drink, but he did not take anything, and only wished to rest a little. Then he lay down to sleep, and put a handkerchief over his face. Thereupon the angel went into the chamber where the queen sat with her son, whom she usually called Sorrowful, and said to her, "Go out with thy child. Thy husband hath come." So she went to the place where he lay, and the handkerchief fell from his face. Then said she, "Sorrowful, pick up thy father's handkerchief and cover his face again." The child picked it up and put it over his face again. The king in his sleep heard what passed and had pleasure in letting the handkerchief fall once more. But the child grew impatient and said, "Dear mother, how can I cover my father's face when I have no father in this world? I have learnt to say the prayer, 'Our Father, which art in heaven.' Thou hast told me that my father was in heaven, and was the good God. And how can I know a wild man like this? He is not my father." When the king heard that, he got up and asked who they were. Then said she, "I am thy wife, and that is thy son, Sorrowful." And he saw her living hands, and said, "My wife had silver hands." She answered, "The good God has caused my natural hands to grow again." And the angel went into the inner room, and brought the silver hands, and showed them to him. Hereupon he knew for a certainty that it was his dear wife and his dear child. And he kissed them, and was glad, and said, "A heavy stone has fallen from off mine heart." Then the angel of God gave them one meal with her, and after that they went home to the king's aged mother. There were great rejoicings everywhere, and the king and queen were married again, and lived contentedly to their happy end. The Jew Among Thorns. There was once a rich man who had a servant who served him diligently and honestly. He was every morning the first out of bed, and the last to go to rest at night. And whenever there was a difficult job to be done, which nobody cared to undertake, he was always the first to set himself to it. Moreover, he never complained, but was contented with everything, and always merry. When a year was ended, his master gave him no wages, for he said to himself, "That is the cleverest way, for I shall save something, and he will not go away, but stay quietly in my service." The servant said nothing, but did his work the second year as he had done it the first. And when, at the end of this, likewise, he received no wages, he made himself happy and still stayed on. When the 3rd year also was past, the master considered, put his hand in his pocket, but pulled nothing out. Then, at last, the servant said, "Master, for 3 years I have served you honestly. Be so good as to give me what I ought to have, for I wish to leave and look about me a little more in the world." "Yes, my good fellow," answered the old miser. "You have served me industriously, and therefore you shall be cheerfully rewarded." And he put his hand into his pocket, but counted out only 3 farthings, saying, "There, you have a farthing for each year. That is large and liberal pay, such as you would have received from few masters." The honest servant, who understood little about money, put his fortune into his pocket and thought, "Ah, now that I have my purse full, why need I trouble and plague myself any longer with hard work?" So on he went, up hill and down dale, and sang and jumped to his heart's content. Now it came to pass that as he was going by a thicket tot, a little man stepped out and called to him, "Whither away, merry brother? I see you do not carry many cares." "Why should I be sad?" answered the servant. "I have enough. 3 years' wages are jingling in my pocket." "How much is your treasure?" the dwarf asked him. "How much?" "3 farthings sterling, all told." "Look here," said the dwarf. "I am a poor, needy man. Give me your 3 farthings. I can work no longer, but you are young and can easily earn your bread." And as the servant had a good heart and felt pity for the old man, he gave him the 3 farthings, saying, "Take them in the name of heaven. I shall not be any the worse for it." Then the little man said, "As I see you have a good heart, I grant you 3 wishes, 1 for each farthing. They shall all be fulfilled." "Aha," said the servant. "You are one of those who can work wonders. Well then, if it is to be so, I wish, first, for a gun, which shall hit everything that I aim at. Secondly, for a fiddle, which when I play on it, shall compel all who hear it to dance. Thirdly, that if I ask a favor of anyone, he shall not be able to refuse it." "All that shall you have," said the dwarf, and put his hand into the bush, and only think, there lay a fiddle and gun, all ready, just as if they had been ordered. These he gave to the servant, and then said to him, "Whatever you may ask at any time, no man in the world shall be able to deny you." "Heart alive, what can one desire more?" said the servant to himself, and went merrily onwards. Soon afterwards, he met a Jew with a long goat's beard, who was standing listening to the song of a bird which was sitting up at the top of a tree. "Good heavens!" he was exclaiming. that such a small creature should have such a fearfully loud voice. If it were but mine, if only someone would sprinkle some salt upon its tail." "If that is all," said the servant, "the bird shall soon be down here." And taking aim, he pulled the trigger, and down fell the bird into the thorn bushes. "Go, you rogue," he said to the Jew, "and fetch the bird out for yourself." "Oh," said the Jew, "leave out the rogue, my master, and I will do it at once. I will get the bird out for myself, as you really have hit it." Then he lay down on the ground and began to crawl into the thicket. When he was fast among the thorns, the good servant's humor so tempted him that he took up his fiddle and began to play. In a moment, the Jew's legs began to move and to jump into the air, and the more the servant fiddled, the better went the dance. But the thorns tore his shabby coat from him, combed his beard, and pricked and plucked him all over the body. "Oh dear," cried the Jew, "what do I want with your fiddling? Leave the fiddle alone, master. I do not want to dance." But the servant did not listen to him, and thought, "You have fleeced people often enough. Now the thorn bushes shall do the same to you." And he began to play over again, so that the Jew had to jump higher than ever, and scraps of his coat were left hanging on the thorns. "Oh, woe's me," cried the Jew. "I will give the gentleman whatsoever he asks, if only he leaves off fiddling a purse full of gold." "If you are so liberal," said the servant, "I will stop my music. But this I must say to your credit, that you dance to it so well that it is quite an art." And having taken the purse, he went his way. The Jew stood still and watched the servant quietly until he was far off and out of sight. And then he screamed out with all his might, "You miserable musician, you beer-house fiddler! Wait till I catch you alone. I will hunt you till the soles of your shoes fall off. You ragamuffin! Just put 5 farthings in your mouth, and then you may be worth 3 halfpence." So and went on abusing him as fast as he could speak. As soon as he had refreshed himself a little in this way, and got his breath again, he ran into the town to the justice. "My lord judge," he said, "I have come to make a complaint. See how a rascal has robbed and ill-treated me on the public highway. A stone on the ground might pity me, my clothes all torn, my body pricked and scratched, my little all gone with my purse. Good ducats, each piece better than the last. For God's sake, let the man be thrown into prison." "Was it a soldier," said the judge, "who cut you thus with his saber?" "Nothing of the sort," said the Jew. "It was no sword that he had, but a gun hanging at his back, and a fiddle at his neck. The wretch may easily be known." So the judge sent his people out after the man, And they found the good servant, who had been going quite slowly along. And they found, too, the purse with the money upon him. As soon as he was taken before the judge, he said, "I did not touch the Jew, nor take his money. He gave it to me of his own free will, that I might leave off fiddling, because he could not bear my music." "Heaven defend us," cried the Jew. "His lies are as thick as flies upon the wall." But the judge also did not believe his tale, and said, "This is a bad defense. No Jew would do that." And because he had committed robbery on the public highway, he sentenced the good servant to be hanged. As he was being led away, the Jew again screamed after him, "You vagabond! You dog of a fiddler! Now you are going to receive your well-earned reward." The servant walked quietly with the hangman up the ladder, but upon the last step he turned round and said to the judge, "Grant me just one request before I die." "Yes, if you do not ask your life," said the judge. "I do not ask for life," answered the servant, "but as a last favor, let me play once more upon my fiddle." The Jew raised a great cry of, "Murder! Murder! For goodness sake, do not allow it! Do not allow it!" But the judge said, "Why should I not let him have this short pleasure? It has been granted to him, and he shall have it." However, he could not have refused on account of the gift which had been bestowed on the servant. Then the Jew cried, "Oh, woe's me! Tie me fast," while the good servant took his fiddle from his neck and made ready. As he gave the first scrape, they all began to quiver and shake, the judge, his clerk, and the hangman and his men. And the cord fell out of the hand of the one who was going to tie the Jew fast. At the second scrape, all raised their legs, and the hangman let go his hold of the good servant, and made himself ready to dance. At the third scrape, they all leaped up and began to dance, the judge and the Jew being the best at jumping. Soon all who had gathered in the marketplace out of curiosity were dancing with them, old and young, fat and lean, one with another. The dogs, likewise, which had run there, got up on their hind legs and capered about. And the longer he played, the higher sprang the dancers, so that they knocked against each other's heads and began to shriek terribly. At length, the judge cried, quite of breath, "I will give you your life if you will only stop fiddling." The good servant thereupon had compassion, took his fiddle, and hung it round his neck again, and stepped down the ladder. Then he went up to the Jew, who was lying upon the ground, panting for breath, and said, "You rascal, now confess whence you got the money, or I will take my fiddle and begin to play again." "I stole it, I stole it," cried he, "but you have honestly earned it." So the judge had the Jew taken to the gallows and hanged as a thief.